Colombia's presidential elections abroad started with the opening of a polling station in New Zealand. The process will be extended until May 29th. In Venezuela, an international colloquium for the bicentenary of the Battle of Pichincha is being held, with the participation of international guests. And the Palestinian National Authority brought the case of the murder of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh to the International Criminal Court. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, from the teleSUR studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. And now we begin. The Colombian presidential elections began this Monday with the opening of polling stations in New Zealand, a process that will continue until 29th May, the day on which the elections will be held in the South American country. The National Registrar of Colombia, Alexander Vega Rocha, said that with the opening of the polls in Auckland, New Zealand, the elections for the president and vice president of Colombia from abroad officially began. More than 97,000 Colombians are eligible to vote in 67 countries during these elections, which could determine the next president of the republic or the two main candidates for the second round on 19 June. Meanwhile, according to Vega, the logistics for the presidential elections have begun in the national territory, assuring that so far more than 100,000 electoral kits have been dispatched. In Colombia, this Sunday, presidential candidates closed their electoral campaigns for the elections to be held on May 29th. The candidate for the Pacto Histórico coalition and so far the favorite in the polls, Gustavo Petro, closed his campaign this Sunday with his vice presidential candidate, Francia Márquez, in a huge rally in the historic Plaza Simón Bolívar in Bogotá. For his part, the candidate Federico Gutiérrez from the city of Medellín put an end to his electoral campaign in a public act, from where he demanded transparency in the elections of next May 29th. In the same vein, the candidate Rodolfo Hernández ended his campaign in an atypical way, connected via Zoom to give a speech to his followers who were in the main park of Piedecuesta in Santander. During Ivan Duque's administration, the deepening of neoliberal policies triggered a widespread popular discontent, a crisis that worsened amid the pandemic. Therefore, the streets became the alternative for demonstrating dissatisfaction with a government that disregarded citizens' demands and whose response was repression. Our correspondent, Hernán Tovar, gives us the details.
Gareth Steven Sella, 25 years old, remembers how on February 24, 2021, during a demonstration in the main streets of Bogotá, and as a member of the frontline Blue Shields, he was hit by a rubber bullet fired by an agent of the mobile anti-disturbances squadron of a national police, resulting in the loss of sight in his left eye.
I went out with a shield to take care of people, because the state simply failed, and there's no democracy that guarantees us the right to protest. I went out with that intention, and I remember a very violent response from the state, from the mobile anti-disturbances squadron, and an arbitrary desire to affect my life in a lethal way until they shot me. I survived, but I lost the vision of my left eye.
The first social mobilizations in Duque's 4-year term took place in 2019, motivated by the discontent of a large portion of the population against neoliberal policies. Voicing that unrest took the life of Dylan Cruz, a young high school student murdered by the mobile anti-disturbance squadron, a dynamic that decreased during the pandemic but did not disappear, nor did the police brutality that left 13 people murdered while protesting.
It is a police force that has committed many human rights violations systematically. Let's say repeatedly, over some time. That is what we believe in civil society. There is no doubt This is something that has unfortunately characterized these 4 governments of Iván Duque. That has been going on for a long time, but that intensified during these 4 years.
Amid the restrictions imposed by the pandemic, a social unrest developed all over the country against neoliberal policies and violence. Indigenous people, farmers, students and workers mobilized and took to the streets and highways of the country. The city of Cali, in the department of Valle del Cauca, became the epicenter of the resistance. There, not only did the police act against those who mobilized, but also armed civilians took part in the repression and human rights violations. The city went under military control, and the demonstrators were singled out and stigmatized with the consent of the government.
If you want a future for Colombia, if you truly have a conscience, please sit down and listen to the people's demands. The people who supported you and those who are supporting you will not always be there. The death of many innocent people will remain on your conscience and in your presidency.
During the 2021 protests that occurred from April 28 to July 15, and according to non-governmental organizations, there were 84 murders committed in various departments of the country, 44 allegedly committed by the police, 96 victims with injuries to their eyes, 32 homicides in the hands of police, 7 of the cases of firearms shooting by the police, and 2 due to gas inhalation. In this context, opposition congressman summoned the Minister of Defense to a vote of no confidence. However, legislators allied with the government did not approve it.
The national government and the ruling parties were shockingly silent and applauded the illegal actions of certain members of the police. It is important to mention that they applauded the illegal actions of certain members of the police.
International organizations supported the proposal for police reform. They requested to separate the police from the Ministry of Defense, to draft and approve a law regulating the scope and limitations of the right to protest, but only a law on citizen security, which grants more punitive powers to the police, was processed and approved.
Hernán Darío Tobar, teleSUR, Bogotá, Colombia.
Now we move on to other topics. Brazil's former president, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, will attend a meeting on Monday to form the political council of his electoral campaign, together with leaders of the 7 parties that have declared their support for his candidacy for the October elections. The meeting will take place in Sao Paulo and will be attended by the representatives of the Workers' Party, the Brazilian Socialist Party, the Solidarity, Socialism and Freedom Party, the Green Party, and the Sustainability Network. Participants will discuss the electoral scenario, the coordination of Lula's campaign, as well as the commitments he will have to fulfill as the presidential pre-candidate. According to the polls, Lula leads the voting intention with up to 42% against Jair Bolsonaro, who has 35%, in the face of elections scheduled for the 2nd of October. In Panama, popular organizations continued the protests that began 14 days ago in the province of Colón, demanding social programs that benefit the people. Demonstrators stated that they will continue to mobilize themselves until they receive answers from the government to their demands. Their protests for a freeze on fuel prices and measures against the high cost of living that affects all Panamanians. These mobilizations were also joined by teachers at national level, transport workers, and civil society groups who are urging more people to join the struggle activities. Among the demands are the claim for the restart of the new Manuel Amador Guerrero Hospital, the construction of a new land transport terminal, as well as improvements in educational centers and roads. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. In Venezuela, an international colloquium for the bicentenary of the Battle of Pichincha is being held with the participation of international guests and members of the History, Memory and Heritage Network. The meeting, which takes place at the Municipal Theater of Caracas, aims to promote the awareness of the Latin American peoples in the middle of geopolitical changes in the continent. The Colloquium seeks to commemorate the independence battle that took place on May 24, 1822, on the slopes of the Pichincha volcano in Quito, where for the first time forces from Guayaquil, Bolivia and Chile participated together with Venezuelans, a key episode in the liberation campaign of the South against the Spanish Empire. The opening of the activity, which will last until May 24th, was attended by the Venezuelan Foreign Minister Carlos Faria and also by the Minister of Defense Vladimir Padrino Lopez, who in his speech emphasized the importance of the union between brotherly peoples.
Union is possible for a higher purpose, such as independence and freedom, for a higher purpose, which is to avoid slavery, ignominy, and to avoid being stepped on by the empires of yesterday, today, and all times. Pichincha calls us, I repeat, to reflection. It calls us to the practice of union. It is possible if we leave aside the meanness, the pettiness, and the things that divide us as brothers.
Now we move on to other topics. The United States government and its allies announced on Monday that they will intensify cooperation to strengthen Ukrainian troops amid the conflict in Donbas. At a video conference meeting with defense ministers from 44 countries, the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, indicated that his country will continue to provide assistance to Ukraine to maintain its war operations in the middle of the conflict in the Donbas. Austin affirmed that Washington will allocate $40 billion for that purpose. He also promised that they will continue working so that Ukraine has all the necessary materials to defend itself. He also pointed out that the members of the Group of Aid to Kiev donated to Ukraine several artillery munitions, coastal defense systems, tanks, and armored vehicles. On several occasions, Russia has denounced that Western military assistance to Kiev encourages confrontation in the Donbas. In the same context, U.S. Defense Department officials said they are considering suspending special forces to Ukraine, allegedly to protect the Washington embassy in Kiev. Defense Department spokesperson John Kirby confirmed that security conditions in Ukraine are being examined. The official explained that the proposal has not yet been presented to President Joe Biden. Kirby recognized that if the president approves the initiative to send special forces to Kiev, it will be a big change in the ground, since Biden promised not to send troops to Ukraine to avoid further military escalation in the Donbas. Russian President Vladimir Putin met with his Belarusian counterpart Alexander Lukashenko in Sochi on Monday to discuss bilateral integration and cooperation in the midst of the conflict in Ukraine. During the meeting, the heads of state and government discussed various issues, including bilateral cooperation and progress in the implementation of political, economic, and trade strategies. The Russian president indicated at the meeting that in his country the indicators are positive and show that the Russian economy is successfully responding to Western sanctions. For his part, the leader of Belarus, Lukashenko, explained that the West was wrong in assessing the economic capacities of both nations. The Russian government stated the plan submitted by Rome to United Nations aimed at restoring peace in Ukraine. According to Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Rudenko, the document was received by Russia recently and is currently being examined, and the position on it is to be established. International media revealed that it is a four-stage plan, including the restoration of the ceasefire accompanied by the demilitarization mechanisms, the neutrality of Ukraine backed by an international political guarantee, and the status of Crimea and Donbas. The deputy minister also proposed to elaborate a new multilateral agreement on peace and security in Europe. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Palestinian National Authority brought the case of the murder of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh to the International Criminal Court. Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki said on Monday that the brief file on the murder of Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh had been forwarded to the prosecutor's office of the International Criminal Court. Abu Akleh was killed while covering a fair fight between Israeli forces and armed Palestinians in the occupied Jenin camp on May 11th. The next day, the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, promised that the matter will be taken to The Hague. Al-Maliki described what happened to the social communicator as a crime. Mali Foreign Minister Abdoulaye Diop called on France President Emmanuel Macron to show no hostility towards his country and to respect its decisions and sovereignty. The Malian diplomat said both nations have maintained relations at different levels since colonial times, and that Mali has never sought to quarrel with France, but urged President Macron not to continue violating their sovereignty and to take responsibility for their actions. He also highlighted there are very strong and intense ties between Malians and French, despite the depth of the crisis and political disagreements. The foreign minister stressed that the crisis in relations between Bamako and Paris is connected exclusively with politics. And China expressed strong dissatisfaction with resolute opposition to United States President Joe Biden's remarks that the U.S. will defend Taiwan militarily if the Chinese mainland were to take Taiwan by force.
We urge the U.S. side to abide by the One China principle and the provisions of the three China-U.S. joint communiques, honor its important commitment of not supporting Taiwan's independence, exercise prudence in words and deeds over the Taiwan question, and refrain from sending any wrong signal to the Taiwan independence forces, so as to avoid seriously damaging the situation across the Taiwan Strait and the China-U.S. relations. China will take resolute actions to safeguard its sovereignty and security interests. We always deliver what we promise.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson reaffirmed the Chinese people will defend its national sovereignty and national territorial integrity.
No one should underestimate the resolve, the will, and the ability of the Chinese people to defend their national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Do not stand on the opposite side of the 1.4 billion Chinese people.
And now we move on to other topics. Pre-monsoon rains have flooded parts of India and Bangladesh, killing at least 24 people in recent weeks and sending 90,000 others into shelters. Both heavily populated nations in South Asia are vulnerable to frequent floods and are considered major victims of climate change. The deaths have been reported since April 6 in India's northeastern region, with Assam state continuing to experience floods. Those who have left their homes due to the floods are staying in more than 200 camps set up by authorities. The Indian Army and the Air Force have had to evacuate thousands of people in the last 2 weeks. Flash flooding is also occurring in the Bangladeshi district of Sylhet, which borders India's northeast.
We don't have any idea how we will survive. We are just waiting for the government to take some action and have a look at our situations. We have nothing to eat or drink. My children are starving now.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.